And our Judicial Candidates Forum this morning features a number of candidates, 4 of them as a matter of fact. One of those is Tony Sottile joining us this morning. Good morning to you.
Morning, Todd. Thank you for having me, and thank you to Renda Broadcasting and Mark Burdig for giving us the opportunity to speak to you and to the voters on this important race.
I have a number of questions for you. All of our candidates are receiving the same questions in the same order, and we'll see how far we get down this list of questions determined upon your responses. So the first question is sort of a presentation type of question. What are the 1 or 2 things that you feel the voters need to know about you and your judicial philosophy in determining whether you're the right candidate for them?
I think the most important thing that they need to know is the nature of this position. When our third judgeship was created in 2003, it was created to deal with a large caseload in the family law area due to an explosion in the number of cases in this area, which includes child custody, divorce, child support, spousal support, those types of issues. That type of judgeship has continued to this day up until Judge Hanna's retirement last year. And I think the important thing to know is that I believe of the 4 candidates, I have the most extensive family law experience dealing with these types of issues. And I would be willing to and ready to assume the bench on day one and deal with these issues. Indiana County has had, in a county of this size, above average numbers of filings in these types of cases over the last 10 years. And if you look at the statistics from the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts, our clearance rate is below average. So there has been so much work in this area that we have had to bring in senior judges to help to pick up the slack. And that was true even before Judge Hanna retired. So there's a tremendous amount of work to be done in this area, and I'm ready to take on that work on my first day.
Well, the second question is very much related to your response to the first, and it is this particular seat on the Court of Common Pleas has traditionally been dedicated to family-oriented cases. How would you like for the court to be defined moving forward? I assume based on your first answer that you would like it to continue in that vein, but I'll ask your response.
I would like it to continue. I believe it needs to continue. But without pigeonholing myself, I have also been a civil litigator for my entire 26-year legal career. So I have handled cases in all types of the civil practice of law, including personal injury cases, contract cases, construction cases, consumer protection cases, condominium cases. So I am a more well-rounded candidate than just being a family law candidate. But as I mentioned in my first answer, given the tremendous amount of caseload in this area and the need for these matters to be addressed and cleared more quickly, I believe that the court will have this judgeship stay that way, and I would be prepared to deal with it in that fashion.
Tony Sottile is our guest on our Candidates Forum this morning for the judge of the Common Pleas Court in Indiana County. In your experience watching judges conduct court proceedings over the years, what are some of the more difficult aspects of being a judge of the Court of Common Pleas in Pennsylvania?
I think one of the most difficult things is to get the cases moved and cleared out of the system. I know in some of my experience in trying cases before our juries, one of the comments we hear from jurors is, why are cases taking so long to be processed? And that's not necessarily a reflection on the court, it's just a reflection on our judicial system. So I think the difficulty is moving these cases and giving litigants their day in court and feeling that they're receiving a fair day in court from the court and from the judicial system.
Are there other problems that you see that might be specific to judges in Pennsylvania or in this level of the court procedures?
I think it's a problem courts are facing throughout the country. I don't think it's specific to Pennsylvania, although it's probably an issue we'll get to later in our discussion, but the increasing drug problem in our county is causing problems for courts here based on increased criminal activity and increased drug problems. So that is particularly affecting our courts. But I think that the problems with the caseload and an efficient judicial system is a problem that courts face throughout the country.
There have been some Supreme Court rulings in recent years that have affected sentencing guidelines for both juvenile and adult cases and cases for which a juvenile is charged as an adult. Do you favor mandatory minimum sentences, especially in that light?
I don't believe I do, Todd. The mandatory minimum legislation doesn't appear to have worked the way it should have. I believe that an individual judge should be able to listen to the facts of the particular case and apply his sentence based on that case. Every case is different. It has its own particularities that may make a sentence need to be tailored to that case. The problem with the mandatory minimums is it's increasing costs to the system, having more inmates for longer sentences, which increases the burden on our taxpayers. It hasn't proven to reduce recidivism, which is criminals committing crimes again in the future, and it hasn't proven shown to improve public safety. So I think it's better to leave that discretion to the judge hearing the individual case, and for that judge to determine a sentence at that time.
When a higher court reverses a decision made by a judge on the Court of Common Pleas level, how does that make you feel as you've observed that over the years?
Well, I've never had the opportunity to be reversed, although I do sometimes serve as a permanent hearing officer at the Domestic Relations Section hearing support appeals. The permanent hearing officer is Attorney Matt Budash. In cases of conflict of interest with Attorney Budash, I'm called upon to serve in that capacity. I hear appeals and then I do issue decisions, so at times those decisions could be appealed to our judges here in court. And, of course, nobody wants to be overruled. You feel you're making the fairest and most just decision, but there are two sides to every story, and I think any judge would feel some concern when he's overruled. You want to feel that you're doing the best job for the people in your court.
Tony Sottile is our guest, our Judicial Candidates Forum, the Court of Common Pleas in Indiana County, the May 16th primary, just days away. Should there be a specific court for specific types of cases, such as those involving veterans or drug cases?
I think when you say court, you mean a specific judge assigned to a court?
Now, there are some courts that are set up just to handle veterans cases in Pennsylvania, some courts set up for specific types of cases.
I think we'd be limited here in Indiana, number one, because we have 3 judges, and each judge has a large caseload. I think it may not be practical economically for us to do that here. I do think that, of course, all of these litigants deserve their own special attention in court, but I don't think it would be practical for a county of our size to do that.
Tony Sottile, our guest this morning. What, in your opinion, are the factors that must be involved in approving plea bargains?
My biggest concern would be the victim. We have to recognize and appreciate the victim's role in this case and what they've been through and the relief that they seek from the court in terms of these plea bargains. I know the average citizen and even myself, when you read some of the articles and you see the amount of plea bargaining that's going on, people wonder why they do that. You read the facts of a particular case, at least as they're reported, and it seems pretty clear that some of the charges that are dismissed could easily be proven in court. Now, that's obviously an assumption based on limited facts without knowing the details of every case. But I think you, of course, need to consider the victim's needs, and the question that comes into it is the strength of each side's case, the prosecution's case and the defense case, and the likelihood that the prosecution will be able to prove all those charges at court. But it's very important to recognize the concerns of the victim in terms of reaching these plea bargain decisions.
As a judge, would you have a problem stepping in and recommending a plea bargain? How active would you be as a judge in that process?
I think you consider the positions of both sides, again, the prosecution and the defense, but I also think that as a role of judge, you need to make sure that the penalty that's being suggested is commensurate with the crime that's been committed. Again, taking in the input of the victim and making sure that the suggested sentence is appropriate. And as a judge, if I felt that that was not appropriate, I would not accept the plea and would move forward with the case. We
continue our Judicial Candidates Forum with Tony Sottile. You mentioned this a little bit earlier in our discussion this morning. Can the courts play a more active role in addressing the opioid crisis? What would that role be? How would you define that role?
I think we're making a good effort right now with our drug treatment court. It's providing new options in lieu of incarceration for certain drug offenders. It's helping to reduce repeat offenders, improving safety, and lowering costs. I think this is a concern that has been expressed to me on the campaign trail. Everybody's asking about it. What are we going to do about it? Because the numbers are frightening when you think of our community, traditionally a very safe community, and when you hear some of the numbers that have been advanced, some by my opponents, it's concerning what's taking place here in Indiana. So in addition to that, this is a war that needs to be fought on many fronts. Number one is tougher sentencing. The criminals, drug offenders have to receive tough sentences, especially the dealers. Indiana County can't be a safe haven for drug dealers. But it's also important to advance education. One of the programs that was recently implemented in Indiana was sponsored by the Rary Bench Funeral Home, educating students at Penn's Manor and Purchase Line, I believe, through the Learning Lamp program. It's very important to educate our children on the dangers of opioid abuse and to try to reach them early before something happens. There's also advances taking place in medical research to provide alternates to the use of opioids in treating conditions. That way a patient doesn't innocently get addicted trying to treat a medical problem that results in severe pain. One of the houses I stopped at on the campaign trail was a physician who mentioned there needs to be an improved database among physicians to prevent what I would call provider shopping, where a patient can go and get a prescription from one doctor and go to the next and get another prescription and increase their supply of these opioids, which may result in distribution on the street. It should seem fairly simple that can't take place, but the software needs to be developed and implemented. And then other states are suing drug companies for the resulting costs imposed on communities by this epidemic. Drug companies are flooding the market, resulting in increasing costs for communities and combating the epidemic. And I know West Virginia is one state that has done that. They've taken on the drug companies and attacked the problem in that manner. So there's a lot of effort that has to be coordinated on multiple fronts to try to combat this problem.
Just a couple of moments left with Tony Sottile this morning. While the opportunity might be limited on a county level, what are your thoughts on judicial activism versus strict adherence to the written law?
I would not be an activist judge. My position is to adhere to the Constitution fairly strictly. We have a document that has, at least in the United States, survived for over 200 years. It's incredible what our framers were able to accomplish in that respect, that it can still be such a strong, powerful document this many years later. It's not my role to legislate from the bench, especially as a common pleas judge. As you said, we really don't have that opportunity. But my job is to apply the law as it has been established in the Constitution and interpreted by our appellate courts, and apply that law fairly and impartially to anyone that comes before me.
Thank you so much for being with us this morning.
Nice to be with you, Todd. Thank you very much.